Salud amigos, tripulantes de
Greetings,
nuestra
friends,
querida, contaminada y única nave
people from our only and unique
y no hay bote salvavidas.
spaceship. We don't have another one. And we don't have
En
a
ese
safe way
encuentro
for
de
this one.
estado del receptor,
Wherever you are,
está sobre su eje imaginario y por supuesto
we have
sigue generando
another turn in the axis.
y hoy están muy fluidos
And today,
en lo que tiene que ver, por ejemplo,
it's been very
con
flow
el tema interno, con el
with the
tema de
internal
los inmigrantes
matter of the immigrants.
y el drama que está ocurriendo
And the drama that occurred in many different
en Estados Unidos,
countries.
la Estatua de la Libertad dice,
Like in the United States, when the Statue of Liberty says about welcome all immigrants, but the President of the United States, Donald Trump, doesn't want that. And they have moved troops to the border of Mexico to deal with this caravan that to him is undesirable. But the reality is that we have here. Troops are deploying to the border with Mexico. In Miami, Texas, Arizona. All those names are Hispanic names that the United States now own. Why does the President of the United States is deploying all these troops? It's because he's afraid, because they want to go back. The video shows all the troops going to the border in Texas, near Mexico. Very important base. The C-130 for backup, deploying troops, like if there was a war, to spend the night wherever they have. All of trucks, buses, soldiers into the convention section.
I'm, pro-immigration. I think people paint Trump with he's an anti-immigrant.
President Donald Trump said on October 31st that the United States can even deploy 15,000 soldiers. This because of the caravan that is fleeing from Central America.
Cierras la puerta con llave de noche, ¿cómo haces acá?
Diversity makes our country what it is, so I'm not for closing borders.
La propietaria de pequeñas empresas dice, bueno, estoy a favor de que las fronteras sean abiertas.
Owners of little shops are welcome to the immigrants. They think that the diversity of the country is what makes it rich. What happens with the immigrants is very hard for children. And when they say this camp, they think it's horrible.
Who feels like we shouldn't secure our borders?
Y Richard Bell, en Baltimore, un hombre que se dedica a la comida al mar, dice, tenemos que asegurar nuestra frontera. La frontera es como si de alguna manera se tratara de un problema político.
This shop owner thinks they should secure the borders, like if it was a house and lock their door, to feel secure, to really know who lives in the country. It's not about separating countries and separating families.
Bueno, el señor opina que se debe apoyar la actitud de Trump contra la inmigración.
He supports Trump's opinion about migration. And this other owner, an immigrant owner, is very grateful of living in the United States. Gives a second chance after fleeing her country. The next election, the midterm elections, are very important, and I think she hopes people will go out and vote. Migration is one of the main issues for the United States President Donald Trump, and there is a reborn of socialism. Democratic socialists are looking for votes going door by door. The President Donald Trump also has to talk about socialism. He's a little bit afraid. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, a socialist, a United States socialist,
Y Roberts hablando dice que hoy hay voluntarios socialistas demócratas de Estados
They
Unidos.
say that they're talking about socialists today in the United States and talking about the proposal number 10. Communications Director
Teníamos al menos los DSA, es decir, Los Ángeles alrededor de 150 miembros.
talked about at least 150 members in California. And now we're talking about 300 or 400 right before President Trump's winning the elections. Events continue to happen in the world, and this is why the new reborn of socialists. This member says that socialism is important because it puts human beings first, all human beings, and it's more important than any profit. This may sound radical for others. I think people are being manipulated by this system, and people have had enough. This is where socialism begins. That people are more important than profit, than money. And it's about building a more solidarity.
Decimos en Estados Unidos para crear que somos individuos, que no somos islas, y que las cosas que hacemos impactan no solo a nosotros. Creo que se puede hacer mejor las cosas en realidad.
I think things could be done differently, not just for ourselves, but for all people. That's what solidarity is.
Lecturas hasta en las camisas. Los Ángeles, California. Iris Salai, directora de comunicación de los Socialistas Democráticos de Estados Unidos, capítulo Los Ángeles.
Socialism in Los Angeles and in California. Talk about the main points in socialism, and the increase of socialism comes after Donald Trump elected. The reality is that people are getting inspired not only for disasters but for a good change, and that was the reality that happened here. This is exceptional, and it's a positive change.
Actually, the biggest boost we had seen. I think that's really exceptional and gratifying.
She's right here. I can't let you go. She's looking at.
Socialista demócrata
Alexandra Ocasio, a socialist democrat, won the primaries in the Democrat Party. Ocasio-Cortez Blanco. President Donald Trump goes to the UN, and people talk about the anniversary of Karl Marx. What does President Donald Trump says about this? Socialism and communism have brought suffer all over the world. All countries must resist socialism and the misery that it brings.
Algunos de los asesores del Consejo Económico de la Casa Blanca, entre ellos el extracto de la cultura, se coinciden con el 200 aniversario del nacimiento de Karl Marx.
200 years after Karl Marx's anniversary of his, that's where socialism begins again in the United States, and starts with supporting the Congress and voters. This lady talks about the suffering that she's living because of the society that she lives in, especially in health. She's working in the party. People say that the Democratic Party cannot be changed, but they will still try to do it. Maria Estrada, one of the big candidates for the Socialist Democrat. A Puerto Rican, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was the surprise in these primary elections, beating Joe Crowley. These have shaken the politics in the United States. Meet Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The country is as much surprised as she is with her victory. Alexandria beat Joe Crowley, one of the main leaders in the Congress. I have confidence in putting people together, and I might win. People like me are not supposed to run for any political seat. My mom's from Puerto Rico. My dad is from the south of Bronx. I was worried with your zip code says who you are. The Puerto Rican vote and other Latin American communities have helped her get this win.
For a very long time, the party has been drifting from the real needs of working-class New Yorkers.
Alexandra made her campaign. She spent a whole week protesting in the border with Texas. The family separation is really inhumane. It's a violation of our rights, of our human rights. And this is what we should fight. Bernie Sanders is a clear example of the socialism inside the Democrat Party. The Democrat System Party in this election must learn that the real power is a progressive movement in the communities.
Un saludo además a Guapa TV, la primera televisora del Caribe que conocí. Estamos en Naciones Unidas y el embajador.
Now we're in the United Nations, and the foreign minister, the Cuban foreign minister,
La voz del movimiento de los países no alineados, la MNOAL, que lidera Venezuela en forma pro tempore en la sesión del 1 de noviembre de 2018 que aprobó el cese del bloqueo contra la hermana.
talk about the blockade in Cuba. We want to call Bruno Rodriguez, Foreign Minister of Cuba. I want to thank the Secretary General of the United Nations about its report of this important issue. Madam President, the General Assembly for a lot of years have backed and support Cuba, making a call to lift the blockade imposed by the United States against this country. In this sense, they want to reiterate the rejection against these coercive measures because of its nature, legal nature. And this movement wants to call to the United States to put an end to this blockade, this financial blockade that has been against Cuba for nearly 60 years. This is a violation to Cuban human rights, Cuban right to talk with other nations. Madam President, our movement have kept this principle against the coercive measures which are tools to manipulate countries, especially with developing countries. The blockade against Cuba is just one more thing that the United States has done against the peoples, against their rights, including their development. There's a direct and indirect attack against Cuba. It affects all the important sectors, including health, food, inversion, tourism, and the economic is a major blow in this year 2018, taking into account that many accounts have been closed because of any Cuban being involved. Besides that, the blockade is an obstacle, like with the access with internet and technologically, sports and culture developments in this country. So without a doubt, we say that this blockade is unjustifiable, and it doesn't go with the times that we are living. It goes against the continuous efforts to reach Cuban goals, the 2030 agenda. The Cuban damage that has, because of this blockade, it rises until $900 million. Since the last time we talked about this, only a year ago, the blockade have cost $400 billion. The relations between the United States and Cuba. The implementation of the blockade has not been changed. In the same way, the relations between the two countries have been threatened by the policies imposed by the current president of the United States in June of 2017 that wants to strengthen the blockade against Cuba. On January 15, 2015, the resolution were promising, but they have a limited reach, and the blockade is still going, despite this historic decision taken by the last president, Barack Obama, to modify the Congress to remove Cuba from the blacklist of terrorist countries, an illegal list, a unilateral list that Cuba should never be a part of. Madam President, the fact that 108 countries voted last year in favor of the resolution it tells us that there's a unanimity in the international community to end this blockade. It has been going on for 56 years. This goes against the United Nations. It goes against the not meddling with other countries. Now, 190 countries have relations with Cuba, while the United States is alone with its illegal policy, unjustified policy. That's why all these nations are insisting that the United States join them with this UN Assembly and made a call to put an end immediately to the blockade imposed in Cuba. Finally, this movement it reassures the great respect it has for the United Nations, especially for not meddling and equality. It's an essential thing For international respect, the United Nations should continue working coercive measures, unilateral measures, including the blockade against Cuba imposed by the United States. Madam President, we want to declare our solidarity with the Cuban people because of dignity, patriotism. They have resisted this blockade. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela will vote in favor of the resolution in this document titled Necessity to put an end to the blockade, to the economic blockade imposed by the United States against Cuba in its original version, just like what was shown by the Cuban delegation. We made a call to all nations to reject changes to this document, which has as its proposals to deviate the attention from the main issue, the illegal blockade that has been going on for more than 50 years in our brother country, Cuba. From Venezuela, we think that it's time to apply measures to build international mechanisms to fight these coercive measures against millions of innocent people all over the world. It's time to organize to free our people from this weapon that is attacking the whole world. Next, there was an intervention from Bruno Rodriguez, the Foreign Minister of Cuba, to the people of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania State, and the United States for what happened in the synagogue, where only 11 people died. We want to give our condolences to the people of Indonesia as well for airplane crash on October 29th, where 189 people died. Madam President, representatives, delegates, June 25, 2018, the kid Adam Lopez Macias, of 180 days born, was intervened to help her with a natural-born defect in her arteries, in her heart, an anatomic problem with a malfunction of their arteries that was putting in danger his life. The surgery lasts 5 hours. His delicate state, hypertension or low pressure, low blood flow, obligated to have their chest open for 96 hours. The blockade prevents to kids, the Cuban kids that suffer from this kind of operation, for not enough pumping blood from the heart. This complication is very common in heart operations. We want these kids to have the better treatment. That right now the United States companies, Hardware International from Massachusetts, has a patent on it. how to measure the pain of this little kid and his family. Adam got better thanks to the professionalism of the Cuban doctors and the effort from the whole country. On December 13 of 2017, Rosa Esther Navarro Ramirez was operated, born 33 weeks of pregnancy. She already have 1 year and 12 months. She was bleeding with oxygenated blood mixes with non-oxygenated blood. He had fast heartbeats in an unordered fashion. 33 days was in the hospital for this condition. Had high blood pressure in her arteries. She couldn't count with the perfect medicine for this because Cuba cannot obtain it because it's flammable and it needs special conditions for its transportation. If we didn't have that blockade, we could have had that medicine, asking the United States company that has this drug. Datex Foods is the one who has it. Rosita is alive, despite this cruelty of this policy. A girl from Guantanamo with a tumor, and a kid from La Habana with tumor and the brain tumor. They were not able to be treated by the right medicine, the one that is produced in the United States. Luckily, they have surpassed this disease. There's another medicine that can tell when you have a cancer and to treat patients. The providers of this special medicine usually ask for this diagnosis to supply it. In 2017, 224 people died per 100,000 inhabitants because of the lack of this medicine due to the blockade. In the last year, more than 30 companies like Isreal, Book Medical, and Thermo Fisher Scientific refused to sell to Medicuba or they just didn't answer to our requests. There shouldn't be any mother that should not feel bad for cases like this. There are a lot of cases like this because of the blockade. It's even a human rights. It's even about human rights. How this blockade, it can be counted. The suffer. The goal of this blockade was based in the Cold War and hasn't changed with time. Lesson Mallory, the Secretary of State, April 6, 1960 is guiding today's politics. It says there's no political opposition. The only mean to lose the government support is to provoke distrust with economic pressures. You have to put in work all the means necessary by denying Cuba with medicines and supplies, so they to provoke hunger, desperation, and a coup against the government. End of quote. We're glad about the recent signature in 2016 by a company, Roswell Park Center, that will allow the commercialization in the United States of vaccines with Cuban technology against the head cancer, neck cancer, and lung cancer. Also the sale to Cuba of 81,000 dosages of human hormones by a United States company, Bayer, a branch of Bayer. The blockade is the main prevention to have internet and technology to Cubans. By preventing Cuba from having access to information and technologies and to use cyberspace for acts of change of regime. It also affects culture, sports, and social society. The U.S. government, with incredible pretexts and political motivations, real motivations, denies Cuban visas, puts obstacles to travel to Cuba and reunition of families. The blockade constitutes a rights violation, a massive, systematic violation against Cubans, and it is an impediment to the well-being of Cubans. These policies are affected by the Cuban people that are living in the United States. The blockade is the United States.
Madam President, the government of the United States manipulates and politicizes the universal wish of guaranteeing human rights to all people and sustainable development goals in the amendments that you have presented, with the only purpose of changing the nature and focus of the resolution against the blockade that this Assembly has proved 26 times, with the goal of manufacturing a pretext and obtaining some kind of international exchange to continue heartening this that the Assembly, Madam Ambassador, will not provide. A memorandum that was distributed among accredited diplomats last week by the State Department, which I have in my hands, recognizes this, and I quote, "The amendments we have proposed are aimed to address the underlying reason of the embargo." End of quote. Later, cynically, the Department of State points out, I quote, "Last year, the Assembly made a direct reference to the fact that the embargo undermines the collective efforts to implement SDGs. The memorandum says, we have listened to you all, the delegates, loud and clear. Cuba's actions clearly threaten these goals, and in order to implement them in full, we need your support to the amendments." The scarce respect of the U.S. ambassador and the Department of State's to United Nations is well known, as well as to multilateralism. This assembly, which last year it called a political theater. The memorandum that was distributed is a mock to multilateralism, decency in international politics, and this universal and democratic assembly. It calls our attention that the memorandum uses a deceitful resource of presenting the text of the amendments as a previously agreed language to indirectly introduce references on other topics, on another country. Once again, it is the practice of deceit, lies, and immorality in the political speech. Document L7 with one sole amendment of 8 paragraphs was turned into 8 separate amendments with the sole purpose of confusing, abusing time, and tiring the Assembly. This is a deceitful move, Madam Ambassador. If the U.S. government wants to debate and vote for initiatives on human rights or the SDGs, we are willing to do it immediately in any entity, at any time, and under any pertinent topic of the agenda. We will continue urging dialogue and cooperation as the only way to favor progress in the exercise of human rights, and we will keep our active and constructive participation in the Human Rights Council in its exercise of periodic universal revision and cooperation among all, absolutely each and every universal mechanism. The U.S. government has no authority whatsoever to criticize Cuba or any other country in human rights. We reject the repeated manipulation of these with political goals and double standards that characterize it. Your government is responsible for crimes against humanity. It used nuclear weapons against civilians. It develops massive extermination weapons and is now starting a new arms race. It perfects nuclear weapons. The large lethal weapons and uses cyberspace and ultra-terrestrial space. Your government established military dictatorships and organized bloody coups. With the wars that your government has generated in the last years, it had caused millions of deaths, many of which innocent people, and waves of refugees with the following human suffering. Your government has used extrajudicial executions, kidnapping, and torture. It now keeps prisoners in indefinite times without defense, courts, or due processes in the naval base of Guantanamo that is illegally taking over our territory. The government of the United States is the author of human rights violations against its own citizens, especially Afro-American and Hispanic people, refugees, and migrants. In the midst of wealth of that country, 40 million U.S. citizens are living in poverty conditions and 52 million in impoverished communities. More than 500,000 of your citizens sleep on the streets without you mentioning them. They lack 12% of the people in the United States lack medical insurance, and your government will take away this insurance to many poor people. Quality education is not available to the majorities that your government neither represents nor defends. Equal opportunities in the United States is a dream. The government you represent is a government of millionaires who impose savage policies. Women receive, for equal jobs, 82% of wages of men. In case of Afro-American women, 64%, and if they are Hispanic, 62%. Accusations of sexual harassment are generalized. The average wealth of white families is 7 times greater than that of Afro-descendant families. Twice the number of Afro-American children under 1 year die in relation to white children. Afro-American mothers have between 3 and 4 times more probability of dying at birth than white mothers, and half of them could be saved with better care that the Department of State never claims. There is a racial differential pattern among the penitentiary population in the United States. The arrest sanctions, the execution of death penalty applicable to underage and disabled in atrocious way by shootings of police. Your government builds walls, separates children from their parents, even small children, who have been put in cages. Fake news and monopoly of technological platforms and communication grow together with content generation. The U.S. government interferes unscrupulously in elections and internal matters of most of our states. It tries to defeat by force, overthrow the legitimate government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and uses a brutal campaign of defamation and the military threat while it calls to violence and coup. It interferes and tries to unstabilize the Republic of Nicaragua. It carries out interference in internal matters of the plurinational state of Bolivia. The government of the United States pretends to dominate its empire in America and calls once again for the old, aggressive, and dangerous Monroe Doctrine and the diplomacy of cannons. It redeploys its Fourth Fleet and increases the amount and power of its military bases in the region. The United States is only part of 30% of the main human rights instruments, and it does not acknowledge the right to life, or peace, or development, or security, or food, or the rights of children. Nobody can be surprised that you abandon the Human Rights Council. The special interests, corporate interests, have seized the political system, which is corrupt by definition in the United States. Political words and speech are important, while demonizing and turning into enemies through propaganda to political opponents, institutions, social groups, and nations. You feed and root the division, violence, hatred, crimes, and wars. Impunity of weapons lobbying is to blame for the increase of homicides, even of teenagers. You are exacerbating dirty politics, indecency, amorality, lies, the redesign of electoral districts for political convenience and manipulation of the voters. 6 million U.S. citizens, poor U.S. citizens, were banned from voting in the last presidential elections, and they will probably be banned to vote next Tuesday. In Florida, 21% of voters that are Afro-Americans have been banned from voting. Madam President, quantifiable, accruable damages due to the almost 6 decades of blockade reach the sum of $933 billion, considering the depreciation of dollar versus the value of gold. Accrued at current prices, the blockade has caused damages for more than $134 billion. Only in the last year, it created loss around $4 billion to Cuba. With the income that we have lost due to export of goods and services and the related costs to the geographic location of trade that impose very large inventories, Cuba's GDP would have grown at current prices in the last decade in around 10% as an average annual rate. In view of these difficulties, Cuba has made progress in its economy and provides a broad and solidary international cooperation that your government sometimes hinders in spite of the blockade and the prohibition of multilateral credit. And it has reached human development levels and social justice that are universally acknowledged. The blockade continues to be the essential obstacle to the implementation of both of the 2030 National Plan and the SDGs of the United Nations. They have free determination to peace, development, security, and justice of the Cuban people. The blockade is a violation to the purpose and principles of the United Nations Charter and international law. It is an aggression and economic war that breaks peace and international order. It also violates universally acknowledged rules of trade and navigation freedom. It impairs the principles of Latin America and Caribbean as a zone of peace and objects consensus of the Latin American and Caribbean community and the world. It causes isolation and uncredit to the government of the United States and calls for the fair rejection of the international community. Madam President, we are living times of growing threats to peace and security in the world. Proliferation of unconventional wars, of rude violations to the state's sovereignty, domination policies through the use of force, attempts of reimposing unipolar order, violation of international law, arbitrary and threatening rupture of international treaties, multiplication of unilateral sanctions and commercial wars, essentially caused by the depredating nature and supremacist nature of U.S. imperialism, always aimed to neoliberal fundamentalism, the philosophy of pillage and the so-called peace based on force. As a result of this scenario, serious international problems are becoming acute. Poverty and inequality is increasing. Irrational and unsustainable patterns of production and consumption of capitalism are increasing. The climate change is advancing with all its negative consequences, and dangerously enough, the nuclear threat is being exacerbated. Also, the extraterritorial application of blockade is increasing, especially the persecution to financial transactions and bank and credit operations of Cuba in the world. More than 100 banks have requested the closure of accounts to our embassies and representations of Cuban entities abroad. They have withheld funds aimed to Cuba, or they have refused to make transfers from or to our country. Even humanitarian transfers, as those related to the impact of Hurricane Irma in Cuba or solidarity cooperation projects of Cuba in other nations. The blockade is contrary to the UN Charter, to international law, and its enforcement is aggressively extraterritorial, impairs the sovereignty of our Cuba. From the military occupation of Cuba in 1898 by the United States to prevent our independence, which we had earned in long wars, this has been a relation that has been marked by the goal of U.S. governments to control Cuban destination versus the unbreakable will of the Cuban people to defend our independence and free determination. Today, Cuba is an absolutely independent nation, owner of its own destiny, that develops respectful relations and enjoys friendship and cooperation risk with all the countries of the world. It is a conquest reached with the sacrifice of several generations that will defend it at whatever price we need. With the United States, we have diplomatic relations, some episodes of official dialogue, and we developed certain cooperation, mutually advantage in a limited group of areas. But the definitive sign of our bilateral relation continues to be the economic, trade, and financial blockade that punishes the people of Cuba, inspired in feelings of domination and ideological intolerance and political revenge. We are willing to carry out a peaceful cohabitation, respecting the deep differences with the government of the United States, based on mutual respect, sovereign equality, and the benefit of both peoples. Cubans will continue deciding freely on our internal matters in close unity, as we do in the popular discussion of the project of the new Constitution, and in our next referendum we will adopt it. There is no and will not be any space for the intermission of a foreign power. I must report that the increase of acts and threats of the U.S. government against Cuba have no other goal than to create a more tense bilateral atmosphere where characters that have a long record of confabulation provoke bilateral crisis. As said in this same podium last September 26, President Miguel Díaz-Canel, I quote, "Cuba will always be willing to dialogue and cooperate based on respect and equal treatment. We will never make concessions that may affect the sovereignty and independence of our country. We will not negotiate our principles, nor will we accept conditionings." End of quote. Cuban people of all generations will keep invariable loyalty to the example of José Martí, to claim with the same conviction, before stopping our will to make a free nation, first the North and South Sea will unite, and a snake will come out of an egg.
Bueno, lo contundente de esto es que si de algo vale.
The important part of this is that if the democratic election in the United Nations is worth, 189 countries voted in favor of Cuba and only 2 against, United States and Israel. What was expected. Wherever you are from the other side of the screen, thank you very much for being with you. From Studio 3 of Venezolana Televisión, Dossier ends here. This was Walter Martinez, producer and conductor. Thank you very much.